Hello, everyone, and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to week 3 of the MenEngage Ubuntu Symposium. We're grateful to have you all here. Today's session is mental health. Hope you can all see my screen. Mental health, the male psyche, and gender justice, lessons for life after COVID-19. So I'm just going to go through a few technical aspects of the session, and then I'll hand over to the presenters and organizers. So you'll notice that there are, at the bottom of your screen, there is sort of a globe. And if you press on that, you'll have to select which language it is you'd like to hear the conversation in today. This option is Spanish, French, and English. So even if you're English, you need to select that, even if the speakers are speaking English, because when we have speakers speaking a different language and you're wanting to be hearing in English, you'll need to have selected the English channel. So if everyone can just make sure that they select now the channel that they want to be hearing in, English, Spanish, and French, that would be great. We also have live streaming closed captions. So at the top of the screen, you'll see live and then on custom live streaming. You would click on that and then you'd view on custom live streaming services. And that then gives you an opportunity to listen or to have closed captions or listen in 18 languages. So if French and Spanish aren't good, then there's also Arabic, Bengali, Chinese, Russian, Korean, French, Japanese, Italian, German, Dutch, Hindi, and Tamil. So do feel free to click onto the subtitle services as well, and then you'll get onto a separate page for Wordly, and then you can actually follow the discussion in a range of languages. You can also follow everything that's going on Twitter using the hashtag Ubuntu Symposium or Symposium Ubuntu in Spanish. And for the duration of the call, we ask that you keep your video off and yourself muted unless you're a speaker. To participate in the conversation, and we definitely want to hear from you, you can use the chat box. So you'll go into the participants area and you'll use the chat box. You can put your comments, your questions, you can use emojis, thumbs up, things like that. So feel free to get involved. And then actually at some point in the conversation, the moderators are going to be taking your comments and questions to the speakers. So do feel free to use the chat and get involved in that way. And we'd love to hear from you. And I'm just going to see, I think, yes, we will go to that at the end. So that is it. I'm going to hand over to Rosé now, who will introduce us to the session and to all the speakers. So thank you, Rosé.
Thank you so much, Bianca. Good morning, good afternoon to all delegates and colleagues and friends who've joined us today. We, as SAFEDS and Sonke Gender Justice, we're very delighted to have the opportunity to hold this roundtable at a symposium that is going to be and is already very instrumental to the global gender equality agenda, and it's intersects with diversity, feminisms, accountability, and social justice, particularly within the COVID-19 pandemic. More importantly, the gender equality and gender justice agenda becomes fundamental to discussion. As you've heard from Bianca, we are addressing mental health and its intersect with the male psyche and gender justice, lessons that we have gained to date and hopefully will inform life after COVID-19. A topic that has been shied away a lot. We're aware that mental health has been a taboo in many cultures, not just within the African context, but it is time that it be addressed and tackled and embraced holistically. So we have a very rich panel of discussants, and we will hear more from them later. My name is Rosé Ehtesadi. I'm the Executive Director of SAFEDS. We're based in the SADC region. My co-moderator, I'll hand over to, from Sonke Gender Justice. I'm delighted to be co-moderating with her, Mabel.
Thank you very much, Rosé. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Mabel Sengendo, and I'm with Sonke Gender Justice, based in the Kampala office. I'm one of 2 unit managers that support the regional work for Sonke, including supporting the MenEngage Africa Alliance. And we look forward to the discussion and the engagements that are coming up with our panelists. Thank you, Rosé. Over to you.
Thank you so much. So we're really going to be touching the iceberg of mental health and its intersect to the male psyche and gender justice today. And we've aligned the discussions to share around the 5 critical themes that the Ubuntu Symposium is pivoted: feminisms, power with, intersectionality, accountability, and transformation. And we have 6 countries present. I will leave that to Mabel to unpack a little bit more as the discussants speak. But for now, I want to welcome a fantastic, delightful, honorable, diligent humanitarian who happens to be a princess, an actual princess from a monarchy. Her name is Her Royal Highness Princess Mihanta Ramanantsoa of the Kingdom of Linta from Madagascar. Now, Princess is not just a princess in name. I really believe that she is a princess even in demeanor, and the social justice and development and humanitarian actions that she undertakes, not just in Madagascar, but also speaking out in the world. So we welcome Princess Mihanta to set the tone for us, and before the discussants take over. Your Royal Highness, you're welcome.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Rosé. I'm Princess Mihanta, and it's the first time for me to attend this kind of symposium, so it's a big honor for me. And I will try to speak in English and hope it will be understandable for all of you. First of all, I want to thank MenEngage Global Alliance and its network members for organizing the symposium with such an important focus on the 5 thematic areas, especially at a time where the world is redefining itself amidst crisis, and doing so via a virtual platform that launched on 10 of November 2020 and will extend to June 2021. Then Safed, our dear Rosé Ektesadi and her staff, for our collaborations. The metal from which the spade was made, and the spade from which the harvest was obtained, as we would say in Madagascar. Then Sonke Gender Justice as a partner of Safed, and especially recognizing Reverend Bafana Khumalo, who is a discussant and co-executive director of Sonke Gender Justice, and also co-chair of the MenEngage Alliance. Then other discussants, Honorable Dr. Christopher Kalila, Cleve Ndanga, Lawrence Kabasele, Theto Chemese, and Nakai Nengomasha, whose rich and insightful presentations I look forward to hearing. I feel honored to participate in this MenEngage Ubuntu Global Symposium. This visionary organization campaigning for social justice in a world where everyone has a recognized place, not men against women, but men alongside women. I wish to support this approach of MenEngage organization because its vision takes into account the African context. African countries have a common cultural background, privileging in its actions the collective and community dimension of our respective constituencies. COVID-19 has led to the intensification of feminicide, of violence against women in general, and of incest, in particular in Madagascar. I want to consider this global crisis as an opportunity to change the world. This begins with a conscious change in males mentality. They are the pivot of our African societies because of their patriarchal tradition. We have to address the still taboo theme of mental health, the male psyche, and gender justice, with the revolutionary aim of transforming boys and men into protagonists of girls' and women's rights. When the king of our Mahafali kingdom of Linta refuses to allow children to go to school, this authoritarian decision will have violent repercussions, but he's not aware of it. In our Zebu-centered society, where power is measured by the herd size, the COVID-19 has led to security chaos in the bush. Raids on the Zebus by bandits met a step rise. Inactive boys, teenagers, and men turned to alcohol and drugs and became active agents of violence against girls and women. As a traditional woman's leader, I find a lot of optimism in the initiation of this dialogue. The sharing of experiences, reactions, good practices, and challenges with the participating delegates brings me a lot of hope. I am fortunate to see civil societies at work, to see young people, traditional and religious authorities, political leaders and psychosocial services gathered around this round table, to see them working on gender equality and social inclusion. Acting to advance the rights of women and girls has become an emergency with the COVID-19. It also forces us to invent a new way of living together adapted to the African context. I'm looking forward to and anticipating frank discussions on the various issues influencing men's mental health and considerations which need to be had as men's mental health is addressed. I would like to highlight the 5 subtopics interwoven into 5 roundtable focus areas to get an overview of this revolutionary subject. Men's mental health and removing toxic masculinities, feminisms. Coping with crisis, new hazards while advancing women's rights, power with. Disallowing violence in spaces of diversity, intersectionality, where culture, religion, and politics must converge to end gender inequality, accountability. Nurturing a new gen of young men and boys who are intolerant of violence, transformation. Thank you for your commitment, which makes sense because it holds within it the seeds of change. I wish a lot of success to this MenEngage Ubuntu Global Symposium within a visionary and committed community. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci, Your Royal Highness. I especially want to draw out the word that you used, revolutionary. I think it is definitely time to have a revolution on violence against women and injustice, violence against anyone. So thank you so much, Princess. I think that takes us on to our next stage. Mabel, you're welcome to take over. Merci beaucoup.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Rosé, and thank you to Your Royal Highness for that very, very good overview of our topic today. We would now like to go into the discussions with our panelists, and I would like to start with Honorable Dr. Christopher Kalila. He is a member of parliament in the Zambian National Assembly and has been a member of the August House for 12 years. He serves as the chair of the Parliament Portfolio Committee on Health. He is also a former Minister of Health in Zambia with a strong background in SRHR, health and human rights, and is a strong proponent for women and girls' rights. Please join me in welcoming Honorable Dr. Christopher Kalila, who will speak to us in relation to the Ubuntu Symposium on Men and Masculinities. The topic is nurturing a new generation of young men and boys who are intolerant of violence. Dr. Christopher Kalila, please, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, moderator. I hope you can hear me. I will try to be as articulate and slow while mindful of the time as I can. Can you hear me?
Can hear you loud and clear, sir.
So thank you very much for having invited me to come and participate in this very important symposium. I must also, like Her Royal Highness said, indicate that it's the first time also to participate in the programs of MenEngage. I'm therefore excited and look forward to learn from various other speakers that will come after me, and indeed those that have spoken before me. Yes, I'm a member of parliament currently, a backbencher, and mainly involved in the link between health, human rights, and development. Yes, currently the world is obviously experiencing the COVID pandemic, and with it, we have heard exactly what that pandemic is doing. First, obviously, a lot of people are worried. There is fear, and because of the fact that people don't know exactly, and like whenever there is a new affliction in humanity, generally, you don't know what's going to happen to you the next day. And when we look at the news everywhere else, every day, it's all about COVID. And so definitely this is also putting a severe strain or toll on the mental health of the citizens of the world because of the fear, because of the worry, because of the stress. And in fact, some of them, depending on your genetic makeup and the environment, obviously some coupled with job losses, lockdowns, all these things being confined into small spaces have had a negative impact on the mental health of our citizens. And I can agree with the previous speaker. The result of which definitely is the fact that some of our people, some have ended up being depressed, some are living with anxiety, and these are affecting their relationships within their families, within their relationships, and thereby engaging in some activities that are not desirable. We are also aware that as a result of the COVID pandemic, most of the SR-HR indicators are actually being reversed. We see obviously cases of GBV going up. We see early and unintended pregnancies among the young people. We can expect them to go up because of confinement. We have heard about incest. We have heard about rape, defilement. So although the measures to contain COVID from a public health angle have been acceptable, but we also know that on the other hand, they have had an effect on SR-HR. They have had an effect on the mental health of the global citizens. So there is definitely a link between the COVID pandemic. There is a link between the pandemic and SR-HR. There's a link between the pandemic, including abuse of human rights in some cases. There is also a link between the pandemic and obviously the economy and the disruption to society. So I believe as a parliamentarian, the fact that in order to deal with these matters, obviously they are country specific, but generally we can't afford to sit back when we see that on the other hand, we are beginning to see negative trends like on SR and women's rights and so on and so forth. So in the context of Zambia, as the topic says here, political leadership from Zambia and the lessons. First, I want to say that on our part, one, we are landlocked. We are surrounded by 8 countries. Okay. Secondly, we did not impose any lockdown on our citizens. Up to today, there has always been free movement. All we did was just to restrict flights into the country by leaving only one flight. Why? Because of being landlocked, a complete lockdown would actually have sent the whole country in terms of the economic requirements. We import most of the things, including medicines. So there would have been a severe disruption to that. Instead of dying of COVID, we would probably have died from the effects of the lockdown. So in our context, there was a balance between a lockdown and also ensuring that economic activity continues. So some of our effects, some of the effects may not be exactly what other countries have been experiencing. So basically it is country specific, but the fact that 8 of our neighbors, apart from Tanzania, most of them locked down. Okay, I know that Zimbabwe locked down, South Africa locked down, Botswana locked down with severe measures. The fact that our neighbors who surround us locked down, it also means that in effect, even Zambia locked down, meaning that you couldn't go anywhere else. You just had to stay within the country, although we were able to move around. So we did not see some severe forms in terms of mental health, but from the fact that some companies closed, some scaled down, so there's been some disruption to the economy, there's been a bit of joblessness, so people have been anxious, and therefore, on that basis, we can also say that we followed the same trajectory like other countries, but not very severe. I mean, we only lost about 400 people as of today, somewhere around 17,000 cases, not much. If you compare that, this is less than what some countries are getting in an hour. So, looking at the fact that how do we raise a new generation of boys, how do we need a new generation of men who can respect women for who they are, who can ensure that they respect human rights, how can we do that? Here in Zambia, first of all, we try as much as possible to promote what is known as family values. If you are going to raise a new generation of young people, you have to catch them and start when they are very early. You have to deal with their mentality, their psyche, their understanding of issues at a very tender age, which means that it has to start from the family. Secondly, from the family, it has to go into the school system where many of them are. So you will notice that in our Zambian context, we have specifically in the Constitution a section or an article on family values, which tries to promote things like respect, love, respect for elders, honesty, integrity. And once a year, the president has to come to parliament to come and review the progress on how we have implemented these values, to try and give an account in terms of all these vices, alcoholism, gender-based violence, early and unintended pregnancies, early marriages, abortions, etc., rather safe abortions and so on. He has to come once a year, and this is a constitutional provision. Secondly, in the school system, you have to teach these young people comprehensive moral education. That's the only way you're going to raise a generation of young men and women who understand. You don't leave it to themselves to explore and discover. You need to guide them so they can know that they need to respect elders. They need to respect women for who they are. They are the people who give life, and they must not be unnecessarily harmed just because they are the weaker sex. So that is the second lesson that one can learn from our setup. And I believe that several other countries in East and Central Africa and Southern Africa, as a result of the ISA commitment, are teaching our young people comprehensive sexuality education, which encompasses all these issues to do with violence, etc., etc. And we are doing that. And recently there was an attempt to ban it, but as parliamentarians, we fought together with civil society, which is one other thing. Partnerships are very important when you are trying to galvanize around an issue. So we put it to rest, and I can confirm that this is going to continue. Of course, you need a strong political will. I have already talked about this, but you also need a strong parliament that is able to make user-friendly laws. Okay, you need anti-gender-based violence laws in place, just as we have an anti-gender-based violence law. You need equality laws to ensure that all these international commitments, both at SADC for gender parity, are enshrined in your laws, so that at least you have 50% of all your women at various levels of leadership participating in leadership. So you need strong laws. Secondly, within our parliament, we also encourage men's groups or caucuses to support women. As a result, for the first time, we have a men's caucus against gender-based violence, and their specific role is to promote women's rights, to speak against gender-based violence, etc., etc. This week, the country started 16 days of gender activism. This is going to go over 16 days just to try and get various activities to bring to the fore, to bring to light activities that are against any form of discrimination, gender-based violence against our women. So when it comes to some of the lessons to learn from political leadership in Zambia, these are some of the things that I can cite, except to add that you also need a strong civil society. You need exactly things like what we are discussing now. Men, unfortunately, have been left out in programming when it comes around health, when it comes around issues of development linking to human rights, especially men's health. Almost all the programs which are subsisting at the moment, you will find that they are biased towards women's health, but we rarely speak about men's health. We need men's clinics too. We need to school them. We need to start teaching them. They die in silence. Unlike women, you know, men try, they have this psyche of trying to be macho and stomach things around themselves because they feel that if they're going to voice out, they will speak out to be a sign of weakness. So we need deliberate programs targeted towards them. The same way we have done about women, all these programs about cervical screening, cancer cervical screening, antenatal clinics, these things don't subsist among men. And we need all these programs. Otherwise, I am very grateful for this invitation to come and participate on this program. And I'm readily available. As I have done, Parliament right now is in session, but I've chosen to be part of this very exciting and interesting discussion for which I'm willing to learn from other discussants. So my friends, wherever you are around the world, those are just some of the lessons that we in Zambia are trying to promote to ensure that we raise a new generation of men and boys who respect each other, respect women. They were able to raise them up as equal partners, unlike some of the things that have been happening in the world. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kalila, and thank you so much for making time out of your busy schedule to join us for this very important discussion. And I think the one line that I can take into the next discussion is catch them early. And the next speaker will bring this in very clearly in terms of how we do this. But before I introduce the next speaker, I'd like to remind our panelists that we have only 5 minutes for us to give our intervention. I'll drop a reminder, just so you know that we are running out of time. But thank you so much, and I would like to introduce the next panelist. He is a winner of the Men's Health Best Man of the Year award in terms of commitment to public service in 2007. In 2014, along with the US then Vice President Joe Biden, along with actor Patrick Swayze and the NFL quarterback Don Peterson, he was awarded the Vital Voices Solidarity Award. He is the winner of the Forbes African Male Gender Advocate Award for 2020. And he is also the co-founder, co-director of Sonke Gender Justice, as well as the co-chair of the MenEngage Global Alliance. Reverend Bafana Khumalo is an ordained pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Southern Africa and volunteers his service to the Tembisa East Parish in Gauteng. Reverend Khumalo is going to speak to us about where culture, religion, and politics must converge to end gender inequality. Reverend Bafana, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mabel, for your warm words, and I almost feel embarrassed listening to you introducing me. Her Royal Highness Princess Ramananswa, it's a pleasure to be on this panel with you again. I always enjoy listening to you. And fellow discussants, Honorable Member of Parliament, Dr. Kalila, I wish we had more parliamentarians like you in our region. And indeed, that will help us take this struggle to end gender-based violence forward. The nexus between religion, culture, and politics, I think, is a very important one in relation to what we are talking about today. In a sense, the revolution has started. I don't think many of us would have been aware of a Royal Highness who speaks on these issues in a public platform, acknowledged for her role of leadership in a region where women's leadership is not adequately recognized. And I think the fact that we are in this platform with one such leader who's showing leadership and vision is a pointer to the move that we have taken, I think, as a region in ensuring that we advance the cause for transformation. We cannot address, of course, the challenge of gender-based violence in isolation of our politics, of our economy, of our cultural development, because all of these play a very important role in either determining a progressive agenda or a conservative one. And I want to suggest that the fact that we also have a parliamentarian who has chosen to choose a milder term to abscond from parliament to be in this conversation can only augur well for our involvement, I think, in this important struggle for transformation in our region. Now, MenEngage is hosting this year, which we started last month, rather early this month, the symposium with the theme Ubuntu. And we chose that theme quite deliberately because we want to re-invoke the element of what this continent represents as defined in African cosmology in the philosophy of Ubuntu. Ubuntu as a concept is simply defining that I am because you are. In other words, I cannot be if you are not. And the element of mutuality, of belonging, of respect, of dignity for each other is embedded in the understanding of the phenomenon of Ubuntu. And in many instances, when we talk about culture, particularly African culture, it's always described in the negative in terms of what I would call the bastardization of African culture, mainly by the British, who canonized what they thought they understood to be African culture, but in essence, they missed the mark. Now, Ubuntu as a phenomenon, as you will know, is an affirmation that human beings are important simply because they are human. And the word Ubuntu, for those who are Nguni speaking, will know that Ubuntu does not denote any gender. It's not about a man, it's not about a woman, it's about the human beings. Hence, we have an idiom in the Nguni language that says, Umuntu, Ngumuntu, Ngabantu. A human being can only be a human through other human beings. In other words, there's no one who can live for themselves. We all live for each other. Now, with that cultural basis, it lays the groundwork for me in understanding why we need to frown upon what we see in our communities today. Because anything that tries to sell to us the notion that women are less than what they actually are cannot be talking from an African cultural perspective. Because in an African cultural perspective, we acknowledge that every human being is important because you are, therefore I am. And therefore your gender should not determine your character, should not determine how important you are in society. And I find it very interesting because as a theologian, the notion of Ubuntu is embedded in my understanding in the Christian ideology, if you like, when you read the scriptures in Genesis 1:26 and following speaks about God creating human beings in God's image. And God, the text continues, says, God created them both male and female in God's image. In other words, there's no human being who's created below the image of God. And what does that mean to us? It means all of creation has godliness in them. And it always encourages me that when I look at other human beings, I cannot treat them less than what they are, because if I do that, I'm also demeaning myself, because these human beings in themselves have what I have, which is the godliness that was endowed in all of us, as we read in Genesis. And in the politic arena, we talk of the human rights framework, we talk of protocols, the Maputo Protocol, we talk of CEDAW, we talk of the Beijing Platform. All of these are anchored on the notion of the need to to treat every human being with dignity and respect, and to ensure that everyone is accorded similar opportunities in the world so that they can achieve whatever goal that they want to achieve for themselves. Therefore, this nexus for me creates the necessary grounding which lays the basis for us to draw both from culture to religion into the politics on all these tools that can help us in how we can approach our response to the challenge of gender-based violence. Gender-based violence, in other words, cannot represent who we are. It cannot represent us either in terms of culture or in terms of religion or in terms of politics, because it is not part of our lexicon in the three spheres of these publics, if you like. And therefore, this lays a very good basis for us to say, if we draw therefore from the concept of Ubuntu, which is very important in how we see each other, in how we must relate to each other, in how we need to treat each other with dignity, we are able to build on that from our political position, where we are allowing that everyone must be given the right of everyone, as we say in our constitutions. No one is above the law. All of us are equal before the law. And therefore, all the laws that we have and enunciate in our systems politically must ensure that everyone is treated with dignity and with respect, and no one is exposed to any form of violence by any means, simply because of their gender. And this, for me, is important because it provides us with this necessary platform of saying, instead of seeing these three systems as contradicting, we can see them as in harmony and able to can draw on them in advancing the cause for a world that is better for all, where we leave no one behind. And I think as we continue with this conversation, I'll be interested to hear also from fellow discussants on how we can draw from both these experiences in ensuring that we build a better world for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ntate Bafana, and thank you for keeping time. And I will finish with one of your lines. The word Ubuntu does not belong to any gender, and that's something we need to remember. All of us. We tend to feel like men are more important, but I think it's very clear with the heading of this symposium, Ubuntu does not belong to any gender. We are all equal in the eyes of Ubuntu. I will not be giving summaries at the end of each presenter, because Rosé will come in and provide some key highlights of the discussions. So I'll just quickly move into the next presentation. But I'd like to let you know that you can type your questions, your comments in the chat box, and my colleague Josephine will be keeping an eye out on those, and she'll be sharing those with us to bring up in the discussion later. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. He is a dynamic young man in the forefront of development issues, in particular, psychosocial support and well-being for children and adolescents, including men and boys. He has won 2 awards in 2014 as an ultimate lobbyist for the Center of African Women Advancement, as well as the World Children Prize as a Child Rights Ambassador. He is a development practitioner and a program coordinator at REPSSI Zimbabwe. He is, as he calls himself on his Twitter handle, a man of substance. So I would like to introduce to you our next speaker, Clever Ndanga, who will speak to us about men's mental health and removing toxic masculinities. Clever, you're welcome, and please stick within the 5 minutes. I'll send you a warning when you're close to time.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to start by acknowledging the presence of Her Royal Highness and the Honorable MP and other colleagues present. My topic is on men's mental health and removing toxic masculinity. If we're going to do a bit of interrogation of this topic, we realize that in our communities, we have made so many strides when it comes to toxic masculinity and in number and don't see a lot needs to be done, but the strides have been made. The levels of success may differ from one community to another, but we are surely going in the right direction. Generally, as men, we can say we still enjoy a fair amount of benefits when it comes to this system of toxic masculinity. We still, as men, again, we still have a considerable amount of privileges in the positions of leadership and other spheres of life. We need to keep challenging this situation, the stereotypes that feed it. Changing the situation, the status quo will take a bit of time, but considering the level of dedication and commitment that I'm seeing on this platform, I'm sure we are headed in the right direction, and the end of toxic masculinity is definitely near. For years, toxic masculinity has been promoted, and it has resulted in the ill treatment of women, girls, GBV, limited vision on how we can achieve an equal society. So if you can allow me to go a bit academic and give definitions of toxic masculinity, which refers to a socially constructed attitudes that describe the masculine gender role as violent, unemotional, aggressive, disrespectful, dominating, and sexist. Later on, I'll come back to these terms. No, our society has told us that be a man, only girls cry, men don't cry. This might seem as a very like plain statements, harmless statements, but these sayings are an example of toxic masculinity. They are showing cultural expectations. The expectation of culture is that the men's behavior is aggressive, and that on its own, it's harmful not only to the men but to the community and the women as well. So then what is mental health and the nexus between mental health and toxic masculinity? Mental health, it includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects the way that we think, feel, and act. It also, mental health helps us to determine how we react, how we relate to others, and make choices. For the purposes of this discussion, Madam Chair, I will focus on how our value systems, the Ubuntu, not really Ubuntu, the toxic Ubuntu that the Rev spoke about, how it is promoting toxic masculinity, which in turn negatively affects the relationships and men's mental health. Not only just men's mental health, and that of the people that depend on them for spiritual, psychological, and physical well-being. So having given that definition, Madam Chair, I will not go into the men are bad people, let's all be women route. I would like to start by looking at us, you and me. What is our contribution towards the creation of toxic masculinity? You know, I was talking to a colleague and I said, you know, what we're terming toxic masculinity, these people that we call toxic men, they don't come from Mars or Pluto. They are our fathers, they are our brothers, they are our uncles. And in some instances, they are you and me. So for us to be able to remove toxic masculinity in our communities, first, we need to acknowledge our contribution towards it. You know, as REPSSI, we are working in a number of districts, and we are also working with adolescent mothers and and young mothers. You know, interacting with adolescent mothers, when you talk about intimate partner violence, is that you realize that they actually expect their husbands to beat them. So there's also a study that was done in Kenya on intimate partner violence that says, if he doesn't beat you, he doesn't love you. So looking at this case, we realize that toxic masculinity has been embraced in our communities. And we are now at that critical level where we need to join hands so that we can address it for the sake of our future generations, for the sake of our daughters. So how then do we remove toxic masculinity? We believe that if we are going to remove toxic masculinity, we need to have an integrated approach. We need to lose the silo approach that as REPSSI, we talk to men only. We don't engage women. As this organization, we talk to women only. We don't engage whoever. We need to have an all-encompassing approach. We need to engage communities. We need to engage community, everyone, to undo this societal expectation. This we can start doing by conducting positive inquiries on our cultural and traditional systems. You know, the Reverend spoke about our culture, our Ubuntu. Let us do a positive inquiry. We draw the positives from our culture. If we draw the positives from our traditional values, then from there we can engage communities to see how best we can build a positive man. We can build positive masculinity. As REPSSI, we have developed a tool on positive masculinity. We are excited to announce that we piloted it this year, and it was a huge success. Although initially there was a feeling that the tool might be an attempt to demasculine men, but after piloting the tool, we realized that the participants realized that they have more power to protect men. The participants learned skills on how to harness positive masculinity and promote community development. They also learned that as men, we need to harness our power and we need to do more for women and girls in advancement. I see my boy is giving me a sign. I'll stop for now and get to questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Clever. I mean, that was a very good dive into, you know, what it is, and you gave us, you know, the theoretical background as well, you know, although briefly. And I think to pick up from where you said toxic men don't come from Mars. We usually end up demonizing men and pointing at them, but they are raised in the same society where we're all raised from. So it's a very critical point for us to, you know, to look at as we discuss these issues. And that, I think, brings us, you know, to the next speaker who, in line with what you're saying, he is a clinical psychologist and is currently in private practice. He is a board member of SANAC, a Clinton Democracy Fellow, as well as a social commentator. He believes in the broader relevance and availability of professional psychological services to marginalized and vulnerable communities. His interests are reconciliation, identity, healthy masculinities, racism, and social justice. Please join me in welcoming Teto Semese, and I'm hoping I'm giving your name justice. He's a director of several ongoing creative endeavors to promote health healing through music. Maybe just to add one accolade to all these accolades here, he's one of the very few foreigners who know what strawberry flavored tear gas is, as is currently in Kampala. And those of you who are in Kampala, you know what happened last week. So I'm sure he's now in a very good mood to bring out the discussion. He will be speaking about disallowing violence in spaces of diversity and interrogating violence prevention in spaces dominated by violent masculinities. It's a mouthful, but I'm sure he's going to do it justice. You have 5 minutes, Nteto. Please start.
Thank you, colleagues. I hope you can hear me. There's a bit of an echo here. Can you hear me?
Could you please adjust your microphone? I think you're very faint at the moment.
All right, can you hear now?
Yeah, much better.
Can you
Thank
hear me
you.
now? All right. Look, I must firstly say, in 5 minutes, I doubt if I will have enough to touch on all the things I could have touched on. However, I just want to start saying I acknowledge the, Her Royal Highness, the Prince from Madagascar, and the Member of Parliament from Zambia, and all the colleagues. As said, I'm a clinical psychologist by profession. I have since stopped as a psychologist, Maibu. I work now as a development strategist in an organization called Khule, social justice organization that is based in the Eastern Cape. Colleagues, what I want to do is to ask a question. Is it possible to expect men in our individual capacity not to be violent when in fact our countries in Africa, as an example, as we speak, are violent structurally? If you take South Africa, where I'm from, there is so much that is said about how great our constitution is. And yet, if you interrogate what is happening in the country in terms of gender-based violence, femicide, you look at how that is opposite of what our constitution is. I want to flag this because most of the time when we talk about toxic masculinity, we talk about it as if it's something that does not include our governments. Our governments in Africa have a lot of answering to do when it comes to the development and the sustenance and the promotion of violent masculinities. Last week, Wednesday, I was caught for 3-4 hours on the road here in Kampala. Few days later, about 40 people are dead because of the political situation in the country. A lot of the people who died have nothing to do with the politics. So sometimes when we talk about violent and toxic masculinity, I feel we do not look into what is happening in our governance and our governments in Africa. I am flagging these colleagues because it is my view that until we do that, then we are not going to understand what citizens are doing, because citizens are reflected by the people that we put in parliament. So I'm glad we have a member of parliament here to shed some light with us as to what is it about African governments that makes it impossible for them to have Ubuntu. So many people are dying on the Mediterranean Sea, wanting better opportunities in Europe. They are risking their lives. We see what is happening in Libya. We see what is happening in Ethiopia. We know what has happened in Zimbabwe. We know the struggle that Zimbabweans are still having at the moment. So I want to flag for our conversation that perhaps when we think about violent and toxic masculinities, we need to look closer to the people who reflect us, who we elect into office. I think moving from there, Chair, I was reminded of a great quotation which goes like, the great powers of the world may have done wonders in giving the world an industrial look, but the great gift still has to come from Africa, giving the world a more human face. Rosé, you remember the quote from Steve Biko, we were talking about it. It would seem to me that we have deviated as African people from something that was given to us, which is Ubuntu. Ubuntu to us is not a theoretical construct. It's a way of being where your neighbor's child is your neighbor. The reason I'm called the village shrink is because I grew up under the banner that it takes a village to raise a child. But if you look today, we have become so individualistic. So I want to flag that perhaps we need to look at what Steve Biko talked about when he said there is a great gift that still has to come from Africa, which is giving the world a more human face. Now, the question I always ask, is it possible to give a human face as men when we do not get involved in the struggle for gender equality? I know a lot of men that I work with argue sometimes that, what about us? We are also human, we are struggling, we are expected to provide for our families, we can't provide, we have lost jobs. One has to ask a question. What has happened to us as men in Africa move away from Ubuntu, which is something that we ought to readily have. If you look at the high levels of corruption, even by citizens, business with the state. I'm talking about business people who take business from the states of Africa. I'm talking about black men in particular, because I concern myself with black men. What has happened to us in how we do things? Because sometimes we do not make the connection between how, as a people, we have pursued money and we have pursued materialism to the point where we don't even value human life. I want to conclude, Chair, by saying, as a psychologist, I am convinced that our problems are not psychological primarily. Our problems are deeper than that. Our problems, perhaps they require traditional leaders. I'm glad when I have a representative from the traditional houses, because African traditional leaders have a role to play in making sure that we take our cultural ways of being. Ubuntu is our cultural and traditional gift from our ancestors. It's not something that you go to university for. It's something that is given, but I believe that it has somehow been lost because of all the other things that we have in Africa, which is about materialism and individualism. Chair, if folks didn't know, the World Health Organization estimates that every year, 877,000 people commit suicide every year. That was before COVID. It also states that 15 to 29-year-olds, their second biggest killer is suicide. I want to argue then that it's gonna be very difficult to talk about how we can talk about violence prevention, and what has been dominant is in fact violence. The violence we see in South Africa, if the Reverend can think, I know I'm being given a note now that I don't have enough time. If the Reverend and the other religious people can make us aware of what is it about us that then can be done, because if people are not empowered individually to make a choice to say, I am choosing positive masculinity, when in fact violent masculinity is the norm. Men who do not choose violent masculinity get punished by our society. There is no room for us to be embracing of men who do not conform to the kind of masculinities that we embrace. For instance, here, I was told that there are certain kind of men who are not accepted in Uganda. If you do not behave in a particular way of homophobia, there's a lot of homophobia that I was exposed to. There's a lot of homophobia in South Africa. So diversity, even in terms of how men are, whether you are a man who does not necessarily embrace the kind of materialism that we see, if you are a man who's caring, who's nurturing, who's embracing of young people, who shows compassion, who shows vulnerability, who shows that, okay, I'm going through depression, who asks for help. So we need to be very careful, Chair, when we say we are pushing for positive masculinity, because violence is prevalent. And I want to put it out there to say, until we create an environment which says we are gonna protect, embrace, and reward men who embrace positive masculinity because society punishes them. I think I'll stop there for now, Chair.
Thank you very much, Teto. And I think you raise a number of issues that will be very useful to our discussion later on as we engage with the participants as well. I deliberately put this last speaker to speak last because of the motivation that she is to young women across Africa. She is the president of AFRIAN in Eastern and Southern Africa. AFRIAN is an award-winning African youth network, a movement focused on SRHR and population and development. She is the president of the Youth Advisory Panel for the UNFPA country office in DRC. She is also the focal person for She Decides in DRC, an innovator, and she leads creative SRHR and HIV responsive initiatives in DRC. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Lawrence Kabasele. She will be speaking to us about coping with crisis, new hazards while advancing women's rights. Lawrence, we welcome you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Thank you for bringing young people on board. This roundtable, I see it's really an intergenerational dialogue on how we can push men engagement. So regarding my topic, COVID-19 crisis has given us more challenges on women's rights. And as Afrian, we are a youth network, youth-led network. In the beginning of this COVID-19 crisis, we did a survey for young people to respond. And that survey was to help on responding the need of adolescents and youth during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially the women and young girls. So from the survey, we had three key issues that young people responded. Let it be young girls, let it be men and boys. The first issue was the access to sexual reproductive health and right information. During this crisis, information and services, during this crisis, it became again difficult for pushing girls and women's right to have access to information regarding SRHR and regarding their SRHR. We already know that in some regions, some countries, it's already difficult for women and girls having those services. And this COVID-19 came again to put more things to become again difficult. The second issue, it is the increasement of gender-based violence. And this is linked to the third issue, that is the loss of jobs, because during the start of the COVID, we went to the lockdown in many countries, and most people were at home, they were not working, and many people were afraid of losing their jobs, and making people stay at home, the men and women at home, this increased again the rate of gender-based violence, and which is again the difficult of making the women and girls to have their rights. And let it be that this gender-based violence was sexually and also physically. So it became again more difficult for having women's rights. So from these three key issues, we came up with some solutions so that women and girls could continue having their rights, we could continue pushing together women's rights. And there we put men and boys in front of these solutions regarding these three problematic. The first issue that we came up with, we know that everyone was home and it was difficult to go out. So we had some intergenerational dialogue online with parliamentarians and young people and partners regarding women's and girls' rights on these thematic areas. And from there, we made more young boys, young leaders, many young leaders, to be on front on advocating access to information and services on a different way, services regarding SRHR in different ways during the crisis that the government could.
I think Lawrence is struggling with the connection. Lawrence, you could turn off the video to help your connection, if that's okay with you. Did we lose her? I think we lost Lawrence. When she returns, we'll give her a chance to conclude her thoughts. But I think in terms of time, I would like for us to move on. You might have realized that I was not summarizing the speaking points from the speakers, because part of what we're doing as co-moderators. Oh, welcome back, Lawrence.
Thank you very much. Sorry, my network went bad. So I was saying,
so that you have 2 minutes.
Oh, thank you.
Please go ahead. I'm sorry, I think Lawrence is struggling. I'll drop her a side chat. We'll give her a chance to summarize her thoughts once we get to the discussions later on. So I'd like to hand over to my co-moderator, Rose, who is going to give us a quick summary of the key highlights of the discussions from the panelists, and then we'll take it from there. Over to you, Rose.
Thank you, dear Mabel, for the excellent moderation. This was quite a whiz through of a lot of rich topics and issues in such a short space of time. So even I was synthesizing. I'll do my best. Thank you so much to the discussants for bringing in the diversity to the topic, at hand. We heard terms, from the political leadership context, there is a possibility to get the commitment that one needs. There is a possibility to get the willingness to transform from harmful and toxic behaviors to more progressive and embracing behaviors. And this we heard from Honorable Kalila. But there's something he pointed out that was very interesting, and he used the word galvanize. And he raised what we have for a very long time, and I think in our continent, forgotten to do, and that's to work in solidarity. So we might run with the same issue and run in different directions towards the same destination, but not in solidarity. And he highlighted the issue of clampdown on the anti-CSE opposition that was raised in Zambia, and how it took place not just by one sector, but when parliamentarians came together with civil society and development agencies, and within days they created one vision, one form of solidarity, and the output was valuable for the nation and its people. So galvanizing and solidarity does also contribute to mental health and the well-being of those who are involved, because they feel that they have somebody else in the same position who has their back, that they can lean on, particularly those who are in the forefront of SRHR and development and gender equality and social justice work. Ntate Bafana, as usual, eloquent and very humanitarian in his deliveries, and of course focused from a technical perspective, really reminded us about the concept of Ubuntu and how it is not about female, male, and the divisions that we've created in terms of behavior, even if they're there physically, and that we're all human. And I think Ubuntu is for the African continent, but every continent has got a similar value and ethos. I know South America has, I know that in the Pacific Ocean, the Aborigine and so forth, Middle Easterns have. So it's similar, it's really a principle that needs to be re-looked at and re-embraced when we do speak gender equality, but more importantly, because we know it has an impact on mental health. This takes me to Mteto, who, very eloquently reminded us about how we've become so individualistic, and being individualistic worsens mental health challenges. The basic concept of being brought up in a village actually enhances the well-being of the psychosocial well-being and the mental health well-being. Thank you so much for that inspiring quotation from the hero, my hero. Anyway, I really look up to him, Steve Biko. Those of you who don't know him, please read up on him. He was a young, dynamic, very humble hero in his time, and his legend lives on. Mteto also reminded us of something that is very stark, but also very relevant to actions we want to take post this symposium. Men who do not conform to violence or violent masculinities are punished for it. Now that's very profound, and that's very real, and it's scary and clever gave us a thank you for reminding us about what mental health is. You gave us a definition. I think we all have different perceptions of it, and that's why it is so taboo. But very linked to that concept from Teto, Clever reminded us that toxic masculinities is not out there. Toxic masculinities is right here. It could be my father, my brother. It could be me, myself, or one of us in this group. So it's so much closer to home, and the interrogation of it means it has to be closer to home and honest in its essence. And we also heard another interesting, I think this was more of a question that was thrown out there, and I'd like to hear when the participants, have space to share their experiences and sentiments on the topic of today, is why are citizens, citizens are reflective of their leadership. And I'm going to leave that really, really open, because there are two, many sides to that cubic. So thank you so much, discussants, for the richness. I'm not going to rehash all your presentations, but I do want to say that as we open up, and I'm going to hand over back kindly to Mabel, as we open up for delegates who have joined us to engage with us. We are going to end this roundtable with what we are coining, we stand for her commitment. We don't want this roundtable to be just a talk show. We tick a box, we move on, Ubuntu ends, and life, goes on. We want a commitment to come out of this roundtable and, to take this forward as a community of practice that really brings to the fore and the issue of mental health within all the diverse work that we're doing to advance gender equality and social justice, and we will hear more about that towards the end. So, as you're thinking and deliberating, think what it is that we would want to commit to. We stand for her in this juncture of COVID-19 and the few years ahead that it will be with us in its disruption and violation of risk of violation of our dignity as human beings. Thank you, Mabel.
Thank you, Rose, and thank you for that very insightful summary of what the speakers have been able to bring to the discussion. I will be bringing in shortly Mr. Nakai from Surface to speak about what Rose has just introduced. But before I bring him in, Lawrence is ready now to give the last point of her presentation, because she feels like her connection is going to go off quickly. So, Lawrence, I'm giving you another 2 minutes to summarize that, then I'll move on to Nakai. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I would like to bring in the last point that is also important about this issue, is also the resilient issue, because as young people, we thought on ending, on bringing young women's rights, on pushing young women's rights. We need to work on the resilience of after this COVID-19 crisis. Let it be at the health side and let it be at the economic side, because if we bring in the economic side, we do the resilience of women and girls, we shall reduce also the rate of GBV, and which will make them be active, and it will make them not just stay at home. And also the resilience of the men's side is to support that mentally they could be good and avoid all what is all about violence. So in DRC, we started already with that resilient project, where we did the resilience of 1,100 women and girls in different sectors, which helped them come back financially healthy and be active. But that resilience was on the side of the economic side, and we also brought on the healthy side, so their right could be pushed after this COVID-19 crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurence, for that very, very good summary. And I think this should bring us into the next discussion. And Rosé has put it very, very well, that we don't want this to be just another roundtable where we come in, we speak, and everyone goes back to their lives. And therefore, we want to bring in an angle, a campaign. We stand for her. And who else to introduce this to us? But the gentleman that I'm going to introduce to you now. He's a program officer with Psyche Zimbabwe Country Office, and he's also the MenEngage Zimbabwe Chapter Coordinator. He is an expert in gender norms transformation and a passionate proponent for SRHR and rights for women and girls in all their diversity. Introducing Mr. Nakai Negomasha, and I'm hoping I'm giving this justice. And he'll be giving us key emerging issues as well from the roundtable, as well as the commitments for the We Stand For Her campaign that we're speaking about towards the MenEngage Global Alliance. So Nakai, over to you. You have 5 minutes. And once Nakai is done, we would welcome interventions from the floor. You can type your chat in the chat box, your message in the chat box, or you can raise your hand, and then we will ask you to speak and direct a question to one of the panelists. Thank you so much. Nakai, over to you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for all those powerful presentations. I was going through and listening and writing some things down. And my task is not that difficult. We want to come up with a commitment, and I've put something down and we'll go through it. The We Stand For Her commitment. This is a commitment for action aligned with We Stand For Her. And this has been generated today on the 24th of November, as we are hosting the third MenEngage Alliance Global Ubuntu Symposium, a roundtable hosted by Psyche and Sonke Gender Justice on the topic of mental health and male psyche on gender justice. And we're also looking at how do we take the lessons after COVID-19. We have been privileged to have traditional leaders, religious leaders, and political leaders and development partners together, advocating and forming this community of practice to carry forward the lessons and deliberations from this roundtable beyond the Ubuntu Symposium. And some of the areas of commitment for action beyond 2020 will include ensuring mental health for mainstreaming into the work of men and masculinity. Also looking at addressing mental health for men and boys in their diversity, and also not treating men and boys as a homogeneous group, but also their mental health and their well-being is not homogeneous as well. So we need to treat them as individuals, as different people, and not just have a blanket for all. And thirdly, we want to recognize, just this I'm picking from what people were talking about, recognizing that addressing toxic masculinity, and this will lead us to ending patriarchy and also advancing gender equality, and the intersection of that with sustaining mental health and well-being for all. And looking at also the intersectionality of this is critical. To look at it with gender equality and ensuring inclusivity and diversity as we work across and all human beings. And also looking at investing in mental health is very critical. Mental health for men and also for women, and making sure that we address it as a key issue. Something have been raised, and I think two of the discussants raised this. And to quote this, I just said, quote Reverend Bafana said, a revolution has started. I think it has started today. Let's look at this and let's look at how do we move forward, and let's break the silence around issues of mental health when we look at men. Let's break the silence around GBV. And let's begin to talk about it. Let's make it public. Let's not just demonize men. Let's talk about it. Let's break the silence around it. And to quote one of the line that I picked from this discussion it was that GBV cannot represent us as human beings. Even as men, we refuse to be represented by GBV. GBV cannot be our representative when it comes to who we are as men and as human beings. So we stand for her. Let's put an end to gender-based violence and femicides. Let's stand by her, and this is our commitment that we are raising today on the 24th. Let's stand for her. Let's put an end to GBV and hashtag end GBV and femicide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nakai. And I think I cannot add anything to that summary of what we want to commit to, but maybe also to just put this back to the participants. What would be your commitment in terms of what we've just heard from Nakai? But also maybe to open up the floor now for comments from the participants. If you have any comment in terms of the speakers' presentations, you might have your own experience that you would want to share in line with any of the presentations, or a question to any of our speakers today. Just to also let you know that Rose and Princess Mi Hunter had to step off. They are joining another event right now with UNFPA addressing the KOTLA, the Council of Traditional Leaders in Africa. Also, Reverend Bafana had to step off, he's feeling unwell. So I'm letting you pass questions on to the current speakers who are available now, which is, we have Clever, we have Dr. Chris. I think Dr. Chris looks like he's summarizing, he's moving out. We have Teto, we have Lawrence, and we have Nakai. So if there are any questions, comments, please put them in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and we'll let you get your chance to address the round table. Josephine, I'm handing over to you. If there are any questions that you're seeing that you can read for us from the floor.
Thank you so much, Mabel. There aren't any questions at the moment except a comment from Sazi Makumbe. It's a quote. I think he or she is picking some quotes from the presenters, and they write to say quotes from Ubuntu Symposium: need a revolution to address violence against women, catch them early, avoid silos, use all-encompassing approaches. Ubuntu doesn't belong to any gender. It's just to capture most of the quotations that the speakers were highlighting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. Those are very, very high level taglines that we've picked from some of our speakers that I think many of us can take away with us as we go after this. I see a hand from Muteto, and I think Muteto would like to give an intervention. Muteto is one of our speakers. Muteto, you can come in.
Thank you, Chair. I hope my connection is better without the video. It's been raining here. I just want to share with the colleagues that one of the things that we need to think carefully about, especially in mobilizing more men to get involved, one, in the discussion, but at the same time also get to be a part of this revolution, as my colleague called it, or this movement, is that there is something about the usage of the creative industry. I'm a musician, and the reason I am in Kampala, I was invited by Slum Aid Project, which is one of the feminist women's organizations here in Uganda, to work with local artists to create a song that actually addresses men, calls out men, and calls on to men to wise up. The name of the song is Wise Up. I am sharing this, Chair, because we need to do a lot more in mobilizing men in spaces outside of where we normally do our programming. And music is one other thing that we can use. So I just wanted to share that, to say here in Kampala now, we have a song that we're gonna shoot a video for. We're gonna play for different communities. We're gonna place it on radio. It's in Swahili, Luganda, and Lukbara, and I've got a bit of isiXhosa, which is my language. I am sharing this because we seem to have deviated from working in influencing the psyche of the young people. And I can tell you in South Africa right now, a lot of the music that we see that is popular amongst young people is actually counterproductive, is actually dangerous and enabling of some of the problems that we're trying to sort. So we need to get out of our comfort zone, work with filmmakers, work with creative people, so that even in soapies, you know, whatever it is that people consume during prime time actually reflects the kind of messages and the commitments. And I'm just happy to share that it seems to be something that even the local artists were enthusiastic about. We're going to play the song to a different group of men in different communities and have conversations about it. So I'm sharing it as one way in which we can amplify our messages, because in the absence of us having things that capture the minds of young people, they are open to anything that is out there. And unfortunately, a lot of the music that is popular is also misogynistic, is positioning women in ways that are problematic. So I just wanted to share that, yeah.
Thank you so much, Mteto. And I think that's a very critical point that you're raising, because if you look at one of the ways in which toxic masculinities have been reinforced in our community is through music. If you look at the rap music in America, and the way it portrays women, you know, that's one of the ways that we're seeing, you know, the toxicity is being reinforced among men. So using the same channel to sort of reinforce positive masculinity, I think for me is a very relevant way of addressing this. Thank you so much for that. I see that Dr. Kalila's hand is up.
Yes, yes. Yeah, no, I just, you can get me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
There was a question posed, particularly to the politicians, by the psychologist, the colleague from South Africa, one of our panelists, who wanted answers as to why most countries on the African continent, you still see a lot of violence, you still see young people trying to leave Africa, you know, dying in the Mediterranean, several shot, etc., etc. And I think from my standpoint, it boils down to two things. One is the lack of economic opportunities among the vast majority of our young people in the African continent as of now. And because of that, generally you can they are a restless, you know, a group. So, you know, then they have to seek solutions from within or outside. That's one of the things. And that boils down next to the lack of the rule of law. You know, we are seeing a tendency where some of our leaders across the African continent want to stay in power forever. And because of that, obviously, it comes with challenges of its own on the political front. And that's why you see sometimes some of these issues of violence around the continent. Thirdly, obviously, it's the leadership. I mean, we all know, although we don't want to say it or talk about it, we need to begin to advocate for quality leadership across the continent of Africa, and that way then we can see this quality leadership beginning to rule according to the rule of law, creating opportunities for everyone, including all the issues that we've been discussing in this symposium. That I just wanted to answer because I think he specifically wanted me to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kalila. And I think maybe also a question back to you. I mean, you've raised the key issues around why. Do you have any insights in terms of what can be done to prevent this? If you could share some.
To present, I think it boils down to the citizens themselves. I mean, I was listening to Obama the other day. He was asked the same question, and he said, see, the kind of policies that you get reflects the leaders that you choose. So basically, you, the citizens, have to make sure that now we must be able to scrutinize exactly who we want to lead us, who espouses some of those values that we would like to see among our people, etc., etc. I don't have one specific bullet answer to say. There's no hard and fast rule, but it boils down to the leadership. And leadership is what you put in power. Thank you.
I completely agree with you, and I think I've also heard someone say that the people are the leaders that they choose, and basically, if we choose leaders who are going to let us down, this is what we're going to see. Of course, we have countries where the Trump-like tendencies are taking place. I mean, you choose a leader, but then the current leader also decides that I'm not leaving. So those are also possible in Africa, but things that we can do our part and try and give our voice through those elections and choose leaders who are going to make a difference. Thank you so much, Dr. Kalila. And I know that there are some more comments that are coming in the chat box, and I'll hand back to Josephine to read some of those. And if they're directed to any of the speakers, we'll ask them to answer those. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mabel. So far, there are comments. We don't have any question. I'll read the first comment from Claire Ndanga. He says that positive masculinity emphasizes the adoptive character, strength, emotions, and virtues of men and boys that promotes well-being and resilience in self and others. How to encourage positive masculinity? Number one, encourage boys to express their emotions. It is important to let them do this in any way they feel comfortable. Number two, encourage boys to seek help. Number three, recognize that boys form friendships through activities. Provide spaces for this to happen. Number four, promote positive relationships between fathers and sons and other male adults and young boys. Number five, teach boys to be self-reliant. Number seven, provide psychological support to boys who may need it. Number eight, encourage boys to choose peace. This can be done in a form of pledge. Number nine, hold peer-to-peer dialogues on positive masculinity. And the last one, support boys to develop their inner strength. And then we have another comment from Jude. He says, I agree with the discussion that masculinity must be seen from a socio-ecological model. In conflict situations, like we see across the continent, masculinity has become more toxic reasons why there is an increase in SGBV. So I think we need to address these issues based on socio-ecological model and taking into consideration the different situations that people find themselves in. And then we have another comment from Teto. I hope I pronounced that correctly. He says that, thank you, Dr. Kalila, for your response. We need compassionate political leaders. At the end of the day, as citizens of Africa, we have a duty to elect leaders who reflect the continent we want to see. The last comment is from, I don't know if I can pronounce this one, Amhed, is the surname or the name. Dear all, sound is missed completely from the start. I think he or she is experiencing some technological challenges.
Thank you, Josie. Ahmed, we apologize for the sound. I think it might be something on your end in terms of your connection. If you could get out and try to come back in again, that would be helpful. And thank you so much for the comments in the chat box. But I think also we need to re-emphasize that any interventions that are working towards gender equality, women need to be at the center of those interventions. So even when we're engaging men and boys, we're doing it not just for them, but for the improvement of women and girls' lives. So we need to remember that that's our target audience, and we need to keep consulting them, whether it's CSOs that are led by women, whether it's women in the communities where we work. We need to remember that those are the key beneficiaries of the work that we're doing, and we need to keep in constant engagement with them in terms of ensuring that we're doing what is right for them as a group, as a target audience. I'm not sure if there are any comments that are still in the box. Otherwise, if we don't have any more, I'm going to pass on to the panelists to give them, each of them, 2 minutes to sort of summarize their points or their thoughts, and then we will close this discussion. So if there are no further comments, I would like to start from where we started. Princess Mihanta is not here. So I'll hand over to Dr. Kalila. Doctor, you're muted.
Okay, so thank you very much. As you said, 2 minutes. I believe that if we are going to have a world that is free from violence at any level, if we're going to have a world that is going to have better coping mechanisms to some of the issues that surround it, we need to start very early. So meaning that there is definitely a role for the family what happened to the strong families in our traditional setup? What happened to the strong family values, the extended family system, the support networks around it? These things, we need to bring them back. We need to harness them. And then secondly, the school system, where a lot of our children are, we need to ensure that we continue to teach and advocate for moral education, whatever word you use, whether it's sexuality education, life skills, but basically it must all be centered around the fact that we must teach values of integrity, respect, etc., etc. Then thirdly, I was just listening, we need a movement now that supports boy children. We've for many years been concentrating on the girl child and so on and so forth. So I was listening to Ndanga's roadmap for trying to raise good boys, so to speak. So we need more of that. We need now a campaign for the education of boys, training of boys, trying to bring the good into them, because at the moment their psyche is skewed towards toxic masculinity, if you like. I mean, that's the belief that to be a good boy, you must conquer, you must beat, you must defeat, and so on and so forth. You must be above a woman, etc., etc. So we need more around boys now across the whole world. We need a movement. Boy, children, we must be the center. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. And I think before we go to the boy movement, we need to first ensure that the girls, are well resourced in terms of their rights. And I understand the need for us to raise men who are very aware of gender equality. But I think you also had the answer in your intervention. It starts in the family. Families are where we are grooming boys. If we're telling the boys don't cry, we're raising those men who are going to be bottling emotions and bringing us to discussions around mental health now. So I think you had a view. Exactly. You gave us a very good, I think, starting point, starting from the family in terms of grooming young men into who we want them to become in the future. Thank you, Doctor. I would like to then go to our next speaker, who is Clever. Clever, if you could give us your parting shots.
Thank you very much, Maibo. But building on what the doctor has just said, the reason why I think we are experiencing so much violence and toxic masculinity is that there's much investment that has been done towards the empowerment of the girl child. But what we did is that we forgot to empower the boy child to be able to live at the same level with an empowered girl child. What am I saying? What I'm saying is that in the 90s or 70s, the man was the head of the house. Come 90s or 2000s, women are putting something on the table, but men are not socialized to be on the same level with women. So we need to really invest in the boy child for him to be able to accept or to be able to live with an empowered girl. That's one. And my parting ways, I had partly put them on the comment section, but also I would also want to leave some 5 ways that we can that you and I can challenge toxic masculinity. One is we need to examine our unconscious bias. We need to take a genuine interest. We need to take genuine interest in the experience of others, and take a bold stand as against gender-based violence, against toxic masculinity. There was mentioned that men of positive masculinity in some communities, they are victimized. So we need to have more men that take a bold stand for positive masculinity. If the numbers are big enough, that will be a thing of the past. And then number 3, we must not be shy about toxic. We must not be shy about positive masculinity. I would also want to pose a question probably to some of the men that are here, that you might be comfortable doing the dishes or helping out your wife or maybe your wife when it's just the two of you, but when your relatives are around or when your friends are around, cooking or doing the dishes is something that is not masculine. So at times men can be men of positive masculinity in the privacy of their house, but they cannot do it publicly. So we need to encourage men to practice the positive masculinity publicly. And the last one is as men, let's just be transparent about our mental health issues. Let's try to seek help where we think we need help. And Yeah, because toxic masculinity is something that affects the mind. It's something that is mental. So if our mental and psychosocial well-being is in tune, toxic masculinity will be a thing of the past. Thank you very much, Maibo.
Thank you so much, Clever, and thank you for those parting shots that are, providing some guidance for men on what they can do to make a difference in the world where they live. I would now like to go over to Mteto. If you can also give us your parting shots in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Maibu, and thank you, colleagues. I think one of the things I want to put out there is the fact that as men, especially Black men, we understand when we fight against racism as Black men, we understand the fact that we have individual friends who are white, whether in terms of intimate partners or friendships or colleagues who are nice to us, does not change the fact that white supremacy still exists. So I want to flag the fact that a lot of men tend to think that when women fight for gender equality, if you are not a rapist, when women fight against rape, I was once in that view to say, but I don't rape, so why are you putting me in the same basket as all the men who rape? I want to flag to men that the reason why rape happens is not because a lot of men rape. The reason why gender-based violence, femicide, and rape happens is because a lot of us as men are silent because it's not affecting us, or it's not affecting our partners, or it's not affecting our family members. So we need to understand that the struggle for gender equality, the feminist struggle that women are fighting, is a struggle that also needs us as allies. In conclusion, Chair, I want to also say, a lot of people get shocked when I tell them that the only reason, or the primary reason why I am involved in this kind of work is because for the longest time, I never understood the fact that the person that I was, the man that I was largely due to what the community I grew up in expected of me, until I realized that no, I can actually choose to be the man that I want to become. And the man that I'm becoming is not a decent man or a better man at that. It's like going to church. You don't go to church because you don't have sins. You go to church because you want to pray for your sins. You want to be a better human being. So people have a tendency to think that just because we are in this space of gender-based violence and violence prevention work and being allies to the feminist movement, people tend to think that we are doing this work because we are better. No, we are doing this work because we recognize that we ourselves, myself included as an individual, my psychological blueprint is that of being a violent man because I was raised in a violent community. The fact that I'm doing this work the way I'm doing it consciously almost every day is because of the fact that I know that there is a lot more value and a lot more sense of joy in being a human being that does not want to subjugate other people in order to feel good. So any identity, therefore, that then says, in order to be me as a man, I must subjugate women, that identity is insecure and that identity is unhealthy. So I want to challenge all men in Africa. It's time we stand up. It's time, like Clever was saying, I mean, I'm a psychologist. I work with a lot of men. It's difficult for us to talk about our emotions. It's difficult to talk about our problems we experience in our families with our partners. It's difficult to talk about the problems we face now that we cannot provide, maybe because of unemployment, we've lost jobs. We need to value our contributions in our families and in our communities beyond just providing money. Women in our lives, whether as partners or as friends or as colleagues or as fellow human beings, they need us to relate with them compassionately, and we need to, as Dr. Christopher Kalila was saying, we need to work with boys when they are still young so that we don't spend a lot of time trying to convince men who don't want to change. I think from my side, and Masukule Innovators, we have a group of men in our organization where we help each other, even as fathers, to be better fathers. I mean, we cry to one another. We have lost loved ones during the COVID. We have been providing support to one another. So sometimes we want to complicate these things as if we must have big degrees, and big names for this from big programming. We just need to be compassionate people. As fellow Africans, we need to take care of one another. We need to show compassion, and men need to be trained when they are still boys of how to be respectful, compassionate human beings. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Mteto, and I think you've sort of summarized what our essence as men at the MenEngage Alliance is. We help men understand that patriarchy also hurts them. I mean, if your neighbor is beating his wife, someone will say men are violent, even if you're not necessarily violent. So we encourage men to speak out, become allies. If you see something, speak out. So that's other men can know that it's not just me. We're very many out here who can speak against such issues. So thank you so much. I'd like to bring in Lawrence. If you're still online, Lawrence, please give us your closing remarks.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I would like to add on what the previous speakers are from saying, and I'll start with school. I think teachers are also very important in this issue because if we see even some songs in our school already showing that it's already showing discrimination against women and girls. So it will be great in our schools, even while teaching those boys and girls from nursery school, primary school, to know the value of girls and women. So the schools are very important, and I'm going to come up again with how we will have to continue working together with men who are already engaged to be as champions to other men and make them understand on the importance of women's valorization. So it will be great to have more men engaged as champions, because the conversations between men and men, it will be better than a woman going to talk to a man on positive masculinity. So if it's a man talking to another man, it's more easier. So working with more men engaged, it will be a great thing to change the situation. And also traditional leaders, traditional and religious leaders are very important on this issue because, in our community, many people here, traditional leaders, respect what traditional leaders say, or religious leaders. So it will be great to work with traditional leaders and religious leaders on positive masculinity, and also work with our families, because all start also at home, as the first speaker said. At home, there are some issues. I'll give just an example. Like at my place, my dad does some work home, and when my brother sees, it's easier for him also to do the work home. My brother sometimes prepares food for us, and the same thing like in my uncle's place, he said, okay, Sunday it's the day also men have to help. We have to cook, we have to wash dishes. It's not only the woman who has to do this. So the young boy grows up with another mentality because he got it from the family. So I think the family has also a very important role to play in this. And I think if we work together from the family side and from the community side, it will be great to change the situation. Thank you for the invitation, and I would like to end by there.
Thank you so much, Lawrence, and thank you for that very important point around modeling. We can speak all we want, but if the young men are not seeing, the adults doing this, then it will just be talk. So we need to teach with action. They need to see the older men doing this, and then they can learn and take it from there. Thank you for that. And I would like to end with Nakai. Any parting shots in terms of the we stand for her that you would leave with our participants? Please take 2 minutes to close that.
Yes, thank you so much. We stand for her campaign will be a very good campaign to go with. And the reason why we are doing this is because it's the right thing to do. And like what was said, a revolution has started, and let's move with this revolution of re-socializing boys and men to embrace notions of positive masculinity. And let's learn together with men. Let's unlearn together with men, and let's relearn together. There are certain things that we need to learn. There are certain things that we need to unlearn, and there are certain things that we need to relearn. And never have GBV represent men. Men must not be known for the violent nature, and GBV to be the representative of men. Not anymore in this revolution. And my last words will be, if beer can be balanced to perfection, why not gender equality? Let's balance gender equality to perfection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nakai, and we will look forward to Safed's in terms of leading on that We Stand For Her campaign and how we can take it forward from here onwards. So thank you so much. Before we close, I'd like to hand over to Josephine to read the last few comments on the chat, and then I will close. Thank you.
Thank you, Mabel. There are just 2 comments from Leslie. He or she says, all I can say is mental health is not recognized in our African culture, so it's hard to seek help because of fear of being victimized. Those who are supposed to be our support system start saying it's evil spirit that have possessed you. One ends up not getting help at all. And then the last comment is from Sazi, who agrees, basically commenting on what Wesley has written. They rate to say, I agree with Wesley. I met a woman over 80 years of age, still battling with emotions of rape case that happened to her when she was a girl. Thank you so much, Mabel.
Thank you so much, Josie. And thank you so much to all our distinguished panelists and the participants who have stayed on for the 2 hours for this roundtable. We don't take this for granted. We thank you so much for all your engagements, for all your interventions. And I think we look forward to taking this discussion further. On my behalf and on behalf of my co-moderator, Rose, who is not here, we thank you so much for being part of this important discussion. And we will encourage you to engage more with the Ubuntu Symposium as it continues over the next few months. I would like to hand over to Bianca from MenEngage Global to give us some parting remarks. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you, Mabel, and thank you for being part of the symposium and for the great session. I just wanted to close off with talking a little bit about the ongoing program. So for those who aren't aware, we have sessions every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Plenaries on a Tuesday, regional sessions on a Wednesday, and on Thursday we have a bunch of parallel sessions that are concept driven. So the submissions that we receive, most of them will come out on a Thursday. Coming up this week, we have 2 regional roundtables, one for Africa and one for Latin America. And then on Thursday, we have a few different sessions happening from 3 to 5 Central Africa time. So there's empowering youth with SRHR information and services during the COVID-19 pandemic, the Arab Fathers Revolution, masculinity and health in the Americas, and COVID-19 and masculinities. So those are happening on Thursday from 3 to 5 p.m. Central Africa time. Next week at the same time on Tuesday, the 1st of December, we have Understanding the Global Tide of Patriarchal Backlash. So this is first in a way of a series of backlash discussions we'll be having during the symposium. So do tune in for that. On Monday, the 30th of November and Wednesday, the 2nd of November, the North American MenEngage Network has a symposium. So please do feel free to register for that and tune in. They'd love to have everyone participating. Details are on the MenEngage Symposium site and on the app. And the next Thursday, there is another plenary, Male Accountability Matters to Build Back Better from COVID-19. So there's a lot coming up, and we look forward to seeing you all again. For those who haven't yet, please download the app. This is where you'll get all the information you're looking for. The videos from past events will be loaded there. Links to all the upcoming sessions will be loaded on there. The upcoming program is on there. There's discussion boards. There's opportunities to submit questions to panelists. And this is available in English, French, and Spanish. So please do log into the app and download it. And it's a valuable source of information for everything related to the Ubuntu Symposium. So thank you, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great day, evening, night, wherever you are. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.